is to respond to what's being touted as something new. I don't know. I'll back up a bit. On Sublation magazine, if you don't know what that is, Cutrone was solicited, apparently. He was asked to write something about for socialist unity or towards a socialist party or something like that, and then made the rounds on some of the podcast ecosystem that Sublation is in Platypus Society is embedded in. So we're going to talk about that because to me, there's an ongoing theme. It just seems kind of like more old wine, new bottle, more kind of rehashed things that we've heard before. And I was really quite surprised because he is quite a theoretically learned, that it just really seemed, I don't know, not a lot of meat on those bones, let's say, but we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, he's calling for socialist unity, and not for a socialist party, but like towards a socialist party. So we're not ready for a socialist party yet. And all the socialist party stuff that went on in the past is just antiquated or misguided or whatever. He would call them children. And so we got to back up and get pre-political, focusing on, I don't know, civil society or kind of, I guess, the Palladian thing. I'm not sure. And work towards being able to, at some fantastic point when all the stars align, then launch a socialist party. And I was kind of thinking when I was reading through that article on the 2 podcasts that I used for information on this, that it's kind of, he's got kind of advocating a PMS, kind of a professional managerial socialism that can kind of have a division of labor with the NGO and charity sector that he oddly has no critique of. But anyway, so we're going to get into that. And we're also going to get Alexander's take on, we covered this a few weeks ago with the Your Party thing in the UK that was going on. And now there seems to, since that episode, the Greens had a very exciting conference in the UK. And this person, Zach Polanski, all of a sudden is all over the media there and the social media. And people are very excited about Zach. They like the things that he's saying. And even, now Zara Sultana, that seemed to have been tied at the hip for better or worse with Jeremy Corbyn, now seems to be liking what she's seeing over there in the Zach camp. And I'm kind of playing it along a bit because it seems like it's kind of a bread and circus, that it's the left survivor UK fighting it out who's going to be the designated opposition for the ruling elite. I'm not sure if Survivor's still on, but I hope people are familiar with the analogy. Anyway, so without further ado, I want to get into the matter. Alex, so I'm assuming after you read his call for socialist unity and watched the 2 podcasts that I shared with you, that you have contacted the Brars and said, this socialist capitalist party, Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, is not for me. I'm jumping on the Cutrone train. Is that
well, we wouldn't. It's an unrivaled opportunity to do Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition all over again, but this time with a much less charismatic frontman. If Chris himself is determined to front this up, it's amazing for a man who calls himself the last Marxist. His actual political ideas resemble everybody else on the American left who he's constantly whining about and criticizing. I mean, we can get into this, but my initial response was like, this is basically the same as the DSA. It's the same as their tactics. It's the same as the PSL tactics. It's the same as basically every other leftist organization going back to the 60s, which is to try and do 2 things. One, get back to welfare capitalism. So there's no real talk about like a strategy for socialism in anything that Cutrone says. It's about, well, we're going to build power. Oh, we're going to go round certain obstacles. We're going to work within the boundaries of essentially the pre-existing leftist ecosphere, so to speak. And we're going to somehow rebuild some socialist formation out of that, which again, like, this is the same. This is the same as everybody else has said, like going all the way back to like the 1980s. And it's amazing that this is all that the great man, the last Marxist standing can think of, is essentially, well, all that stuff the DSA tried with Bernie Sanders. We're going to try it again, but without even a national political figure attached to it. So it's nonsense, and it just shows again like the absolute poverty of like Western leftist thinking. It's like the limit of their horizons is welfare capitalism. But we can get into why it's an impossibility and why Cutrone is a stupendous hypocrite. But I'll just briefly mention the historical context here. Welfare capitalism was possible for one moment in time. And if Chris was the great dialectician that he considers himself to be, then he would know that nothing remains still. So you can't recreate FDR's New Deal coalition because two of the central forces which made that up have gone, which is externally the Soviet Union and internally a small but powerful CPUSA, Communist Party USA, both of which Chris denounces, of course, as Stalinism in loud and vitriolic terms whenever he gets the chance. And the forces that made the civil rights movement, which clearly is an inspiration for what he's talking about here, again, that's gone because part of the bedrock of that was not just the churches or the Black American political sphere, but it was also like organized labor to a large degree inside the United States, a still powerful organized labor movement that drew in a lot of Black workers into it. And that was one of the bases of that movement. And that's gone. And so what he's suggesting is essentially like, well, we'll take this sort of this collection of leftovers from like the NGO state and we'll form something out of that. The central problem which affects the American left, which afflicts the entire Western left, is a lack of understanding of how to rebuild the actual power of the working class, and also how to overcome, particularly in the United States, the fact that huge numbers, the working class in the United States now is numerically bigger than it's ever been, but consciousness-wise, it's further back than it's been since probably like the early part of the last century. In fact, it's lower than that. So that's the question that should be tackled. How do you engage with that? Instead of which, we have managerial noodling from Mr. Cutrone. So, I mean, that's my initial response to his collection of thoughts. It's just astonishing how similar it is to absolutely everybody else on the American left.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was a bit surprised because I was waiting to be kind of, have clips I could put out with things he said that I was really taken aback by, but I was really just kind of a yawn. It was quite more of like a series of eye rolls and yawns. And especially with and I know that Benjamin likes to be polite, except for with people who are critical of Zionists, but that's another story. But he went on, and it was kind of like the meat of the matter. So there was this, for those who can, and I'll put the links to his sublation article or intervention. I think that's the word they like to use now. And the podcast that we reviewed for this this part of the segment. But it starts off like, and so he has this. He says it's been in his position for 30 years, but it's like he's waiting for history to catch up to him. But yet the only thing that's materialized out of this thing regarding him is 2 papers, and they're not even a paper. They're kind of like, I don't know, statements, long statements. One in 2016, and now this other one. And Benjamin Studebaker, nobody who goes on and who he's talked about this, asked him like, well, how's it going with this building, not your socialist party, but your project to do with the groundwork to be able to get to the point where you can have a socialist party? Is it just the platypus stuff? Is it just the sublation crew? I mean, and then there was this whole conversation about rights and is healthcare a right or commodity. And it was really simplistic. But I agree with you. I was thinking like this is this kind of a poor man's what's that guy? Oh, the Frankfurt School guy. I can't remember his name now, but it was all about communication and communicative capitalism and the life world versus the system. Habermas, yeah. Habermas, yeah. And the third way. And it was just like, I thought, I don't know. I don't ramble on too much, but again, I know that maybe he's more on the philosophical side of things. But his poverty of actual economic analysis is quite astounding. Not that I had to tell you that, but we'll break it down. So we'll see. So the first part, he talks about again. This is funny. He's building his campaign of building a socialist party that again consists of two statements: outside of the state, through churches, NGOs, civil society is what he calls. I guess he never clarifies which definition of civil society he means, because I remember that civil society used to just be a nice way of saying bourgeois society, but I don't know. I'll let you fill in the blanks there. But this, again, it sounds a lot like liberalism with Marxist language. It sounds a lot like, just PMC, but I know. And it's like, let's do this all over again. Let's just try this again and think that we're going to have better opportunities. Because again, I remember this, I don't know if it was the New Left themselves that said this, but I remember this idea about, after all the stuff that went down after World War II, and the Cold War and all this stuff, that we're going to have a march through the institutions, primarily academia, I guess, and the media, and culture, and that's going to somehow get us to a point where the things that thwarted a working class consciousness from being able to constitute as a class of itself will somehow be overturned. And he doesn't even give a sober analysis of what that's led to, and why it would make sense to kind of rehash that and give it another go. But two of his claims that I thought I want to get your take on is this thing about we have to go back to the pre-political. Yeah, he's advocating for a pre-political turn. And then again, you talked about you've slayed this dragon time and again, but we had to keep on doing it. That Marxism is not anti-imperialist because national struggles are petty bourgeois, which is fantastic for people who don't want to for these lovely liberals or progressives who don't want to risk getting into dicey conversations about Palestine, about Ukraine, about Venezuela, or his topics about why not Greenland, why not this. So those two things there. Narrow it down. He does make this thing about the pre-political, how socialism has to go first, whatever that is, rebuild civil society, and that Marxism is not anti-imperialism.
Well, let's first of all talk about what I'm going to take as his bastardization of the work of Antonio Gramsci, because like Gramsci's discussion and civil society in the prison notebooks is about bourgeois society, as you state, and how the civil society institutions in bourgeois society are, I think Gramsci describes them as the earthworks around the citadel of the state, basically. That these are the barriers that are put in the way of the working class from not only attaining power, but of course coming into an awareness of itself as a class, which is, I think, the central problem facing the American working class as of this moment is, again, numerically very large, consciousness-wise very weak. And the institutions of civil society, whether they wear a right face or a left face, are all still designed to be the earthworks of the American central state and its various different arms. Mm-hmm. And this idea, and you're right, it was a post-World War II idea, really, though its roots go all the way back to the later 19th and early 20th century with the concessions over the vote being brought in particularly in like European countries. This idea that there would be the possibility of the working class, though in reality it means socialist leaders taking over these institutions and running them on behalf of the working class. The working class wouldn't need to bother itself, of course. The great socialist leaders would run them for them. Now, this idea has been, well, it's been tried over and over again in various different Western countries, and it always leads to the same results, which is a few people with a left background get a few jobs. It does not advance working class consciousness one iota. And then the same thing is suggested by the same group of academics a few years later. The point about this is that Gramsci didn't mean, I don't think, in his work, for this analysis of civil society to be, well, these are the earthworks, so therefore we should take them over. No, it's like, how do you navigate around the barriers that are there to the working class attaining consciousness? You don't do that by claiming you can take them over somehow or work within them. These are obstacles to be overcome. It's not, when you were conducting a siege in the Middle Ages, you didn't suddenly say, well, how can we make that moat our own? It's like, well, how do we get over it? How do we actually breach, to continue the analogy, how do you breach the walls of the citadel, so to speak? Which shows that Coutron's project isn't about power at all. It's not about actually attaining state power, which is what socialism should be about. It should be about how do we, as the working class, organize ourselves in such a way as to overcome the resistance of the ruling class and to not simply take over the capitalist state, but destroy it and build our own. That should be what our project is focused on. This, again, like the DSA's project, is about carving out a space within the existing American state and civil society institutions, which are bourgeois, for an official left to exist. And that is the project that Coutron, Douglas Lane, and others, and the DSA, and the PSL for the Party of Socialism and Liberation, they're all engaged in this, which is they want to find a little space within the institutions for them to exist in, because that did exist for a little while under welfare capitalism. It was possible for you to be an official Marxist academic for a while, even in the United States. It was possible to do that. There was a left space, even in the Congress, via like the left of the Democrats, which you could gain access to. And all that's gone away. All that's gone now. And so the labor aristocracy, such as it is now, is currently desperately casting around for ways to try and get that back again. This is just another one of those ways. Now, as to Coutron's claim about that we're in a pre-political moment, this is an old Trotskyite phrase that goes back a long way. I mean, you go back to like the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and they were talking about we're a pre-party formation, meaning basically you're a group of academics or wannabe academics in a talking shop, basically.
Yeah, I kept on thinking about like and not to dunk on Jews, but the thing, I can't remember what holidays, but you say like next year Jerusalem. Like even if you're in Jerusalem, you say next year Jerusalem. It's like next decade, comrades.
Yes. Soon.
Everything's
soon.
We're almost open for business here.
Nearly, but not quite. But what it is essentially is a call not for organization, but a call for a series of essentially endless talking shops where Chris Coutron and others will get up and say, the American left has all these problems. I have the solution. It's the same thing, but I'm in charge, essentially. Now, again, we come back to the problem. The problem isn't a lack of leftist organizations. The problem at heart is the relentless defeats that the American working class has suffered over the last at least 40 years, arguably longer. and the devastating impact of deindustrialization and the historically low levels of trade union organization inside the United States, particularly in the private sector, where I believe it's less than 10% of the workforce are actually in any kind of union. And this, of course, stacks on top of the historically rabidly anti-communist political culture in the United States, which again Chris Cutrone is part of because he's a rabid anti-communist as well, as is Mr. Lane, as are the DSA and others. And this all leads to a situation where like their politics, pre-politics is essentially, again, it's just about carving out this niche, which will be like an official left opposition to like the Republicans and the Democrats, but whilst collaborating with the Democrats. This is all it will amount to, because again, like they're not actually interested in challenging the priorities of the American ruling class. And just to add further, like this is further evidenced by the fact that Cutrone does understand his role in all of this, because this is why he's a rabid supporter of US imperialism. It's why he's a rabid supporter of Israel, for instance, and why he denounces actual forces of national liberation, because he understands on some level that for the project he ultimately wants to succeed in the United States to have a chance, welfare capitalism, with an established left, with all the high seats of academia available to it, well, then American imperialism has to revive, because ultimately that's how the original welfare capitalism in the United States was paid for. It was paid for out of the huge profits derived from World War II and the preeminent position as the head of the imperialist bloc that the United States enjoyed after World War II. That enabled the concessions to be made. So Chris, on one level, does understand this, and this is why he denounces Hezbollah, Hamas, and just about anybody else as gangsters, backs Israel, because ultimately he does get it on one level that for the social democracy he wants to exist, then American imperialism has to revive, and it won't revive if it can't overcome these obstacles. So that's another thing to bear in mind. And furthermore, I'll just conclude on this point, like to try and push for the center of your organizing model to be like the NGOs that currently exist. This is a terrible idea because, first of all, the working class, I mean, I don't know how it is exactly on the ground in the United States, but in
either does he, I have to say. But go ahead.
If he ever met an American worker, he'd probably call the police. But
actually, I think he has said that his husband has a blue collar job. But I'm just talking about that. And not to pigeonhole him though, but he's he lectures at, I don't know, some art school. He teaches theory classes, I think, at some college in Illinois, and he has gotten into this circuit with being the last Marxist and setting up the Platypus organization, which is based in universities.
Yes.
To talk about how, I don't know, whatever it is they talk about. All this stuff, apparently. But I wanted to ask something about that in particular, because when you're talking about the NGO part, and I know that you and have talked about this before on your program, both the Klein and Fall with Clarenberg and your regular program, that the NGOs are a flank of neoliberal capitalism or bourgeois capitalism. So it's kind of odd to me that would be something, and he doesn't even address that at all. It's all good, almost. And didn't it also seem to you like it was kind of like, again, a rehash of PMC, but with the Marxist sounding people and DEI? Like we can get past our differences. Like we just encourage people to get along and work together on anything. That and pretend that there aren't actual division conflicts about quote unquote cultural issues or whatever. You just suppress all that down
Mm.
and people say the right things and make the right gestures, it seemed like that's like the pre-political stuff he's talking about, which is I think what you would agree with is the last 30 years or whatever else since this quote unquote last turn that tends to be called neoliberal, but I know you have issues with that term. You can see that that's failed if you actually want to build a socialist party.
Mm.
So is he just high, or is he just hydroplaning? I mean, I know you can't read in his mind, but go ahead and
Well,
continue what you wanted to leave off with the NGO model and his pro-imperialist socialism.
well, the NGO model is interesting because this is, again, something that was deliberately promoted by the ruling class in the United States and in Britain now as well, specifically in order to facilitate like privatization and the removal of state obligations to provide services that had existed for a while. So you pass that over to NGOs. And in the United States, like and in Britain, that's where you find large elements of the professional left. It's in the hierarchy of the NGO state now, which are all like claiming large amounts of funding from the state itself, but all of that which are there to facilitate privatization and a deterioration of service level. And it's typified by like the ludicrous way in which like the American left like approaches the homelessness question, for instance, which is that they see their job as managing homelessness, not ending it, managing it, which is how you've ended up with like the DSA and others essentially arguing that homeless encampments are a good thing, or that they're certainly it's something that shouldn't be that should be either maintained or defended. Not that that these people should be housed. It's because the interests of the NGO left are now bound up with the management of poverty, basically, not the end of poverty, not the end of homelessness, but the management of it, because that's what keeps the NGO wheels greased, so to speak.
Yeah, and I just want to inject in there that if you read any of these literature things, it doesn't matter if it's the NGO part or the part of academia. They spend a lot of their time, it seems, figuring out the best terms to use to be inclusive and non-judgmental. So it's almost more important that we don't have any discourse around homelessness or drug addiction or prostitution or whatever. It's most important that we have language that doesn't in any way seem to suggest that these things are bad.
Yes, and like this is because the American left and increasingly the British left now essentially exists as employees or adjunct employees of the state to manage social problems for the state, essentially. And so how then does Chris Cutrone's amazing political strategy aim to mobilize these people who are essentially managers whose jobs depend on the maintaining of social problems? How are they going to move the dial to the left exactly? Given that what they would want, and this is the typical of like the NGO state, is a higher budget and in actual fact more clients in reality. And you don't, you not only do you not, there's this class, this sort of caste of people, they are functionally incapable of being like the sort of agents of change that Chris Cutrone would want. But also, like, these people are loathed by the American working class and the British working class as well, because like the model of like the the middle class reformer, the social worker, the the champion of the poor, so to speak, has always been loathed by large elements in the working class, going all the way back to the time of Marx himself, who dedicated like various the latter parts of the, or some of the latter parts of the Communist Manifesto to an excoriating like takedown of like the social reformer, who is basically a manager of poverty in today's language. So why would this actually attract in the working class to this amazing new socialist organization? The actual truth of it is that not only would the working class not be attracted towards this, but I don't think Chris Cutrone wants them to be attracted towards this. This is about rallying the ever diminishing numbers of the professional left, basically, in defense of their interests, which are wholly aligned with the maintenance of the NGO state. And so and this is where, of course, the ruling class has people coming and going, because the NGO state left maintains things like homeless encampments, open air drug markets, etc., and argues that actually this is a good thing, which, by the way, I'm sure Mr. Zach Polanski is a fan of all of this as well, and we'll get to him later. And then that the American left then defends that all of these like social ills, basically. And then the American right comes along and says, hey, that's a disgrace. Society is falling apart. We need tough action now. That's why Trump has to mobilize the National Guard to, defend civilization in Chicago or something.
They're giving apparently they're offering now, the last thing I saw, Alex, just to jump in here, $50,000 signing bonus for ICE, to get people to work for ICE.
Yeah.
Talk about, I mean, and maybe he would think that's a good thing, I don't know, because talk about if I'm a struggling person, especially a guy, I'm assuming most of them be men, and I get offered $50,000 signing bonus, and I mean that is really good. How is that going to affect their politics, especially when there's nothing out there to just? I mean, I can't. I'm not down with ICE, but it'd be hard for me to blame somebody to pass that up.
Well, this is the reason why they're offering such big money. I mean, this is going to be. I mean, part of it is, again, like this is constant reinforcement of what's referred to as like culture war agenda, which is the one side of the bourgeois political divide in the United States creates a crisis. The other side responds to it by saying we must defend point X, or we must attend a no kings protest in a Democrat-run city. That'll show them. Meanwhile, sort of ICE guys are running around like stuffing people in the back of vans and stuff. But again, these are engineered crises. Just to go into the immigration thing for a moment, the whole, again, question of like border security and immigration, particularly in the United States, is an example of how this sort of very cynical game has been played for many decades now by every side of bourgeois politics in the United States. The American capitalist class know that they need a constant stream of fresh and more exploitable labor. That's something that they very much require. They need, again, like capitalism in this stage, well, in every stage, but particularly now, requires an ever-expanding reserve army of labor to continually create downward pressure on wages. They know they can't give up. They won't stop the waves of immigration coming into the country. They need them. On the other hand, they need the current working class, the existing working class in the United States, to be divided against itself and constantly attacking other targets. And that's been the game. You bring in the highly exploitable people. You create a system like ICE, but also, I mean, there's more things than ICE. There's also like Customs and Border Patrol, there's various immigration enforcement agencies in the United States, all designed to do what? Again, it's labor discipline. It's at least it was until this stage. It's making sure that your exploitable workers are terrified that if they so much as breathe in the wrong direction, well, then the ICE agents are at the door kicking it in and dragging them off. At the same time, though, I think it was in the Miami Herald recently, it was covered that just for all Trump's theatrics with the ICE raids, the actual level of deportations is lower than Biden's. Because what's changed is essentially, I mean, here we'll get into, some potentially Zizek territory. But what's changed is that the Democrats were running a perhaps more bureaucratically efficient model of deportations. Trump, being who he is going for showy stuff, like the raids in Chicago and elsewhere. If we're going to speak from the point of view of enforcing policy, are unnecessary. If the policy was actually what Trump says it was, which is, we want to deport more people, etc. What they are serving is a purely political purpose now, which is
Well, wouldn't you even say entertainment? Because are you familiar with the show Cops in the States?
yes.
Okay, because it wasn't just Trump now. I mean, if you look at well, I mean, yeah, the fish rots from the head, or you get the information, you know, that expression. But all the official government sites, it's like there's trolls running them. You have the head of that Christy Nooms lady. She's the head of Homeland Security.
Christy
It's like she's
Noem,
out there like on a cop's call. Like dun, dun. I'm surprised they probably do have music, and they show them like, you know, getting some illegal or some lib, or showing it to some lib. And of course, people it showed like, oh, people like, and then people will respond, you know, both probably paid and genuinely, this is what I voted for, you know.
yeah.
But like you're saying, if you look below that spectacle and you look at the numbers, people who really want, for whatever reason, to quantitatively reduce the number of quote unquote illegal immigrants, it's just crazy. But I wanted to add another thing when you mentioned, you know, that what one side creates the problem, the other side can pretend to fix it, and it goes on. And but then the stream of exploitable labor continues to come in. Also, in terms of division, and why a lot of again, maybe, and this is why, and the DSA hates this, and I think it's also why Catrone rather poo-poo issues that are difficult rather than deal with them. He says, oh, we don't want to get into the morass of immigration debates or abortion debates. I'm sure he'd also say the same thing about gender ideology. You know, no. But they have a problem because a lot of the people who are complaining about the impact of immigration in these cities aren't just quote unquote MAGA types. You know, you have a lot of African Americans, a lot of Latino Americans, and their gripe is, at least from my understanding, is like, look, when we became a quote unquote sanctuary city, all these people that came into Chicago, where they put them in the poor communities. And then we see these people getting resources. And I doubt they get as good of resources as people think, but there's money getting to that. And then the NGO sector, there's some NGO that gets hired to monitor and manage the settlement of immigrants in low income, primarily Latino and African American communities. And then they can point at them, and it gives them the active benefit because it gives them cover from racism. Like, well, look, there's Black and brown people. They don't like this either. And like, I can't blame them. You know, if you look at the numbers and be like, okay, you didn't put anything into our community until it was to settle the immigrants. I mean, they get a win-win.
Well, yes.
You know, the house always wins.
If this is the game that he's played. I mean, partly it's because, well, they're not going to stick a bunch of poor, recently arrived people in a rich area, are they? That's not something that's going to happen. But I mean, again, this is very old, which is like, where did they stick the poverty-stricken Irish labourers when they came to Manchester or Liverpool or Glasgow in like 1845? It was right next to the already poverty-stricken working class. And then you also then send in demagogues into the area, or you employ online demagogues now to say, look at all the stuff they're getting, which is like, again, this is the game, and you need to be able to actually politically tackle these things. Like the Catrone method is similar to like the rest of the left's method, and you mentioned like other difficult issues. I mean, abortion isn't really a big political issue in Britain as such. It is in the United States, so you need a clear answer on it. You also need a clear answer on stuff like gender ideology, which you and I have discussed extensively before. Because
he doesn't even want to get immigration. If you caught that part of the discussion.
Well, no, he thinks it's all a distraction.
Yeah,
but which I would be more forgiving towards if he gave clear answers on anything else. But he doesn't. But again, like the ruling class is like promoting this point of division, and again, this is an old game. So you need a clear answer on it. And a clear answer is to explain to people like, well, look at the record of the big time anti-immigrant parties when they get into government, and actually examine it. Look at what the brothers of Italy do, Giorgia Meloni, which is come in banging the drum saying Italy for the Italians, etc., etc. We will take action. We will take action. Then the Italian employers have a word and say, actually, Georgia, we need a few 100,000 a year. to do what we want to do. So you better make that happen. And she says, oh, well, turns out when I said less, I meant more. And Nigel Farage will do the same dance, by the way. But and again, Trump, I think, will end up doing the same dance because he was already talking about expanding the international student visas to do a favor for American universities. He'll end up having to do the same thing, but it'll be combined with more and more of these over-the-top, hyper-militarized ice raids, which you're correct in the cops analogy there, which is it is about the enjoyment of the audience of the Donald Trump presidency reality TV show, because that is in essence where his political instincts come from, which is if you can provide people with a show, it's like if you can show some, poor, like increasingly poor working class guy who's blamed everything on migration for years, that, well, his life might be getting worse, but hey, look at this Mexican being wrestled into the back of a van by an ICE agent. Oh, by the way, the numbers have increased, but hey, look at the TV, dummy. Come on, This is what again, it's an extension of like it's Trump's particular take on how this policy has always been done. And then the left responds, of course, by saying, empty slogans like no human is illegal, or in this house we welcome insert oppressed minorities. Yeah. But again, you need to explain to people, no matter, to go back to Chris Catrone's point about we're in a pre-political moment, like, again, slightly empty phrase to say the least, but where perhaps he and I would have at least some point of convergence is that there is like a need to start from the base level here, which is that, but again, I would argue he's not doing that. He's trying to build on the rotten foundations of the American left. But there is a need to actually take a step back and actually speak to the working class in a plain manner about what's actually going on, about what's behind the migration waves, why they won't stop under this system, no matter what any politician says, whether it's Trump, Maloney, Le Pen, or Farage. All of them obey the same forces, which is forces of capital, and therefore will obey its demands. But also, like over things like speak about things in a class-based way, which is what like the NGO left refuses to do, consistently refuses to do. If you look at like the way they conduct themselves, it's like they will mention like the working class in their rhetoric, like in passing, along with a dozen different supposedly oppressed identity groups.
It's the thing about classism. It's not good to be classist, which means it's not good to look down on people that don't have as much money or wealth as you do. That's not good.
Yes, yeah. But again, this is the NGO. This is NGO.
Because I know what I feel about. I'm more worried about how people talk about me than if I can, feed my family, afford rent, maybe maybe have a nice staycation.
Well, yeah. If you you could be starving, but as long as people don't use nasty words, it's fine. But the point about like to discuss this whole like pre-political idea, the actual need is to be people like Chris Catrone are looking to do like mass social democratic politics. In essence, that's where he wants to get to. Whilst ignoring how that was possible in the past. Like myself and others are involved in a different kind of political project, in essence, because we recognize that the actual moment that we're in is not designed for, and it is impossible to go back to like the mass communist parties of 50 years ago or the mass social democratic parties of the post-World War II era. That's not on the cards right now. And if they work, if you try to recreate them, you might get some success for a few years, but they'll be very unstable and will fall apart at the first challenge, which is what happened to Corbyn's Labour Party. So what we're actually needing is to build up in working class communities, slowly but surely, a core of very, shall we say, tough-minded and ideologically literate and politically literate workers who can take this a proper understanding of the contradictions of facing their community, their society, into that community and talk to people in a language that they will understand and start training people to actually break out of the the earthworks, shall we say, imposed on them by Chris Catrone's beloved civil society. That's a difficult and long-winded, shall we say, somewhat process, a long-term process, which isn't going to lead to you, I don't know, getting the chair of philosophy at an Ivy League university or even a minor university.
Mm-hmm.
It's something which is going to be difficult and in the short to medium term unrewarding. But if you look at like all of the major revolutions which actually succeeded, then they were all preceded by decades of work like that, essentially. Embedding the Bolshevik Party in the Russian working class took a good generation to do. Like slowly building the Communist Party of China to the point where it was a national force. Again, very different circumstances. But again, between the earliest flourishings and the final triumph, that's a good, again, quarter of a century. And the problem with a lot of these leftists is they want to build a mass organization overnight that will suddenly gain a mass audience amongst the working class, and they think that they can get there within like a couple of years. You know, they're all looking for the weird trick, and this is why part of the reason why they're all obsessed with media. They're all obsessed with, you know, if we can just get in the media, if we can just get a major national figure on our side, if we can just get a name, you know, that's why they'll promote
Zoran Mondani.
Mamdani, yes,
Mondani, thank you.
the great hope of New York, if you don't mind. But also, like, it's why they promote people like fucking Hassan Piker, you know, he of the electric dog collar, and various other.
And I'm sorry, just to get on there, but have you noticed that his head seems quite small in proportion to his body? I'm sorry. I was looking at this. I'm like, what's with that? I don't know if it's the camera thing. Yeah, no.
It's
sorry,
probably effects of spending too long in a gaming chair. But the point is, like, whereas like communications, media messaging, those kind of things, those are important in terms of getting things across. But in actual fact, the way in which the communists in the past got around the power of the TV, the radio, the cinema, and in the old days, the pulpit, though in America that might still be a factor, was via direct communication, in-person communication in a community. Because somebody can believe all kinds of things about what happens outside of their community if there's no one in their community or workplace giving them any version of reality or a proper interpretation of things or a way to analyze things themselves, then they can continue believing it. However, if the person giving them the message is right next to them, lives in the same way they do, works in the same way they do, they're more likely to listen. They're not going to listen to a missionary from an NGO, you know, that Chris Catrone has sent in to tell them the good news. But again, like this is the what I would call the sort of labor aristocratic obsession. Again, it's like this constant need to like we need a big movement, we need a big organization. Doesn't matter if
we could just all get along.
Well, that's what the call it really is for. It's like again, it's like I want to unite the left. Well, is it worth uniting? Is the question.
And I wanted to mention that because it wasn't as exciting. I don't want to use the word exciting. I mean, it wasn't so obviously this kind of warmed over NGO speak that you get when you listen to like Zara Sultana, the great young hope of England and Wales or whatever. But it did seem to be like, again, and also you probably picked up on this. It wasn't workers of the world unite. It's socialists of, I guess, United States unite.
Yeah.
So there's already a distinction. And by socialists, it's just like, yeah, people like, again, I think is what you're quite right. And just like getting back to like a robust social democracy or welfare state, you know, people who want people to be all right and be nice, you know, and this kind, I don't know, United Colors of Benetton and no appreciation. And he's not an idiot. So he must know that what that does is make the class component, both in terms of theory and practice, weaker and weaker and weaker. At least looking back, at least that's what's happened since the 1970s.
Yes.
And I don't know. I don't really get why this is anything he would feel compelled to write. And I don't know why this would be anything anyone compelled to publish. I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
because
You
this
gotta
is
do
all,
something. You gotta have content. But other than that,
yeah. But this is all they've got. You
mm,
know, all they've got is the same work, so the same sort of social democratic holdover stuff.
mm,
Because again, let's just examine the politics of these people, like Cutrone, Douglas Lane, people like that. What defines their politics is, if anything, anti-communism. And again, like the kind of like leftism that was written about years ago by people like Nikos Palantzas and others,
mm,
which is like where you deliberately relegate class contradictions into basically an amorphous blob of various oppressed identities,
mm,
which including like the LGBTQ plus, including
mm,
the blanket term women,
mm.
including the green movement and stuff like that,
Oh, and
which
I just want to flag something. Sorry, whenever you hear someone talk about how oppressed the LGBTQ plus in terms of oppressed, you got to go look at the market value of that contingent.
yes.
And go and look at a lot of those. I'm just saying, of course, just like there's quite a few rich African Americans, and it's not like Oprah and Jay-Z are distributing that wealth along race lines. Same thing with the everybody else. But that community, I mean, it's just kind of odd to me. It's like oppressed how. But sorry, I just want to say in terms of economically as a group, pretty flush with cash. Anyway.
Well, yes, the more, if you're bringing a lot of capital to the table, the more likely you are to get a permanent spot at that table or be able
Mm,
to dictate policy, etc.
mm,
Um, Also, like the LGBTQ plus NGO network is formidable and
mm,
is something which is a that's why it's such a huge presence in modern day politics.
mm,
And again, like we go back to the point, like what worth is it uniting this left? Like what is the point? Because to
mm,
go back to the discussion we were having about what is the guiding principle of their politics, like if again Cutrone is open about it, he's an anti-communist, he's anti-Bolshevik. He has made like ludicrous attempts to claim that Lenin was just another version of Thomas Jefferson in a new time and stuff like that. But also, like, this is the reason why I sort of seriously adopt the moniker of like Stalinist is
mm,
partially as a provocation, but also
mm,
because it reveals a lot of people for what they are. Because one of the things that Stalin calls for in it's the book The Foundations of Leninism is for an alliance between the working class in the imperialist countries and the oppressed nations of the world. That they should come together in solidarity with each other against the common enemy, which is of course the imperialists, the imperialists in the United States, in Britain, etc. And the likes of Cutrone, Lane, and the sublation crowd and the platypus crowd all hate that because these people, along with being, I would say, pretty damn anti-working class domestically, they're all Western chauvinists, internationally speaking. They all believe in the inherent superiority of the great European garden, to use Joseph Borrell's
mm,
phrase. They all believe in like the superiority of themselves, and
mm,
they don't want to have an alliance with the oppressed nations. Which is why, of course, I mean, to go back to Zoran Mamdani, the kind of socialist that gets promoted in the U.S. political system, who could be mayor of New York, I'm sure he'll be just as good as Bill de Blasio, is somebody who is an avowed anti-communist, who attacks Venezuela, who attacks Cuba, who denounces national liberation movements. That's the kind of socialist that makes it in the American political system and in the
mm,
British one as well, by the way. And that's the kind of socialist that Chris Cutrone, the last Marxist, wants to have really in his amazing like joint left organization. And again, we come back to the point, what is the value of this thing called the left? Because the working class in the United States loathes and detests it. Trump knows that, which is
mm,
why he's now bringing up another fake war for his audience to enjoy, which is the war on Antifa.
Yeah.
Which will be,
the radical left wants to kill you.
yes, yeah, the radical left wants to kill you. And again, like you do 5 minutes of reading on this, you'll see that this is a complete chimera. But I will throw in a potentially controversial rhetorical.
Well, there are a few people. If you would say, I'd like to get your understanding of what Antifa actually is, because I always just kind of thought of it as an aesthetic, or I'm more familiar with Black Bloc. So if someone says they're Antifa, I'm like, okay, well, it's a group of guys, usually guys, I'm assuming not only, to get together and they show up at whatever protest is going on and try to like intimidate people, and they wear the baklava thing and have the flag, and maybe they spray paint something or break something, or maybe they get in a ruckus and then they go home and think, oh, look what we did. That's how I understand it. But it could be more than that. So in terms of Antifa, if you would just first say like what we should think, like a more accurate definition than the extreme left that wants to kill you, and then finish your point with how that's how Trump is, how the reason, how this is another example of how the quote unquote left, that they still think, even though they lament it, they still keep on acting like they want to revive it, keeps on offering up these things to Trump and Trump-like people over and over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, I would start by just talking about the origins of where Antifa actually comes from. It actually has a noble origin, which is in Germany, and first of all, with the Red Front, prior to the assumption of power by the Nazis, which is joint communist and social democratic workers organizations, armed organizations which engaged in street fights with the Nazis, and formed the basis of a working class underground which continued to resist Nazism all the way through up to 1945, and kept the basis of Communist Party and social democratic workers organizations in place, which re-emerged, particularly in the East, under the protection of the Red Army afterwards, and also emerged in the West too, to battle the remnants of the SS and other holdouts from the Nazi regime. So that's where it comes from. So it has a noble origin point.
Because I want to say that, of course, in practice, being anti-fascist is always a good thing.
Well, yes, in practice. The question is the thing called Antifa doing any of this? See, this then gets taken up by, I think, via, you're right, the medium, by sort of the intervening period in the anti-globalization movement, so-called Black Bloc, which, you know, when I was much younger, involved dressing in black cargo pants, black hoodie, black boots, scarf over the face, and running around London.
It's a form of anarchism, isn't it? Just kind of like...
it's a form of anarchism. It's very anti-Marxist in actual fact, but this has sort of come together in this amorphous mass in sort of the wilder end of the American left, which involves basically petty bourgeois youth and lumpens coming together basically to have a bit of a ruck with the Proud Boys and others on weekends, or like, you know, roam around Portland.
Yeah, Proud Boys, but also, unfortunately, women who aren't buying into the gender stuff. That's also been
as well. Yeah. I mean, that should also be mentioned.
Is a great gift for the Republicans.
Oh yeah, I think they're called Trantifa, aren't they?
Yeah, Trantifa.
But yes, also means running around trying to beat up women who think that men can't become women because of a thought in their heads, but also, like in the American sense, this is also it's first of all, it's not one organization; it's a series of like loose groups, which I would argue
pre-political. Are they pre-political, Alexander?
Perhaps they are. Perhaps Chris should join them. But they're also completely infiltrated.
That's the nutritional soil you should be trying to plant his flag in.
Yes.
Sorry, metaphorically,
you know. But also, like, these groups are not only infiltrated by the FBI, the various state police agencies, etc. I would argue that they are at this stage a useful tool of the above, as are, by the way, the sort of wannabe fascist organizations that have tied themselves to Trump, in the sense that the Proud Boys, the leader of that, Enrico Terrio, was a longtime FBI informant, or going all the way back to 2012. It is highly, I mean, just throwing in the January 6th thing for a moment, we know that there was over 250 agents and informers were on the ground that day, basically, I would argue, making the event happen. The whole showpiece conflict between Antifa and the fascists, so to speak, which again reduces fascism to a question of aesthetics and memes, is ultimately one that is managed largely by the institutions of the American state. Like Trump's war on Antifa will, if it does anything, will just turn up a load of FBI informants who like go into these loose organizations and say, hey, well, they wouldn't use the term brothers and sisters. Hey, folks, with an X, do you want to go out and stop fascism? And then his equivalent across town with the fascists would go, hey, brothers and patriots, want to go out and do some terrorism? And they all get together and have a bit of a fight, and there's some symbolic arrests, etc. And this is presented as a spectacle to like the viewers at home by Trump then as Antifa's coming to get you, everybody, you know. And
it's very bad. It's very bad.
Very, very bad guys. Very bad guys. And again, like again, you have a guy in Kash Patel who is the perfect man for this war. In like he's basically, I mean, I know he's got a background in legal practice, but he's basically a blogger and sort of you know, perpetual Joe Rogan guest. And again, like this is this is another Trump spectacle. There will be real world consequences.
And also, I'm sorry, just to get this joke in there, he has the very unfortunate expression of someone who's been MK Ultra'd. I mean,
well, he may well have been.
I always see him, and now that I know about MK Ultra, thank you, some of my deep state correspondents and friends. He always has this look when he's on film, like someone has said his off switch word, but it's like malfunctioning, and he's trying to figure out what he has to say. And I know that it could be like, you know, and not to pick on him, but you know, whatever. He's the head of the FBI, so fuck him. But anyway, I just want to bring that out there because it's just bizarre. The whole package.
So. Yeah, the whole thing is bizarre. But I mean, the entirety of like the Trump administration's like propaganda maneuvers. It is basically, as we were saying, this is largely spectacle. This is something which is again, it's for the enjoyment of the Trump base, and part of the reason why he's doing it is because of a catastrophic failure on the policy front, which is that the tariff policy didn't work. The American economy is looking incredibly shaky. He hasn't managed to depress prices on the high street, so to speak, for basic commodities. So this, and of course, there is always the threat of like the renewal of the great crises of 2008. So he needs to do something to keep the audience at home entertained in this particular season of the Trump presidency. And so it's the ICE raids, it's the war on Antifa. We can expect the elevation of Saint Charlie of Kirk to the status of a national saint, and the foundation of the latest, shall we say, bastardization of American Christianity. And all of that, again, this is all the sort of swirling vortex of bullshit. And to go back to the question of the left, and the left dutifully responds to all of this in exactly the way that like the reactionaries in the United States would want them to.
Well, and I want to put this out there that not so much Catron, he tries to be the umpire, like above the fray, but this is enjoyment. I don't want to get into the psychoanalytical for the right, but also for the liberal left, from the liberals all the way on. So they get to see all this stuff like, oh my God, isn't this terrible? Look at the ICE thing. Look at what he said. Look at what they did. And they're all freaked out. They enjoy being able to freak out about that. And that because it also postures them as somehow superior, better, whoever than the deplorables or the MAGA or whoever who falls for this stuff. While all the stuff that's going on, the economics of late stage imperialism or whatever you want to call it, keeps on trucking right along. While we're all, in the Colosseum with the bread and circuses.
Yes.
And I also obviously partake in that. I mean, there's a finger pointing back at me. I mean, it's terrible, but it's also entertaining. It's a weird thing, but
Well, and also to jump off what you were saying there and bring it back to the Cutrone project, like the actual economics of late stage American imperialism continue to rumble on and crush the American worker under its wheels. And the actual economics of this is something which these leftists don't really like to tackle, because again, it would reveal that their big project is fundamentally impossible. So where does the great bulk of the GDP get generated inside American capitalism now? It's not from the production of commodities anymore. Hasn't been for quite some time. It's financial engineering. It's insurance. It's real estate. It's hedge funds. It's corporate buyouts. It's a move again.
Crypto.
Sorry,
Crypto.
yeah, crypto. Well, again, perfect for Donald
Talk about
Trump.
redistribution. Isn't that what all those what they call shit coins are about? The pump and dump and all that. Just redistribution.
Well, it's I mean, crypto itself begins because of like a massive surplus of capital in the system, requiring it to go into various different asset bubbles, which is why we've had so many asset bubbles over the last like 17 years since the 2008 crash.
Yeah.
Now the question of like, well, why doesn't the left respond to this, is because the left doesn't want to look at this. Because if you look at the actual reality of like a late stage imperialist economy, which is the United States is par excellence, with only Britain being further down the road. Well, where's the productive base that you're going to use for your social democracy? Where is it? Now, America's got more of an industrial base than Britain has still, but it's still the fact that, like, if you look at the things they're trying to do to sort of enhance industrial production, say in armaments, for instance, they keep trying to enhance their armaments production. They keep having industrial disasters. Now, that's either because the SVR, the Russian intelligence service, is running the most effective sabotage campaign known to man, or alternatively, unsafe working practices are being put in place on out-of-date and antiquated machinery, which is being run 24/7, and you end up with an accident like the one you saw in Tennessee the other day as a result. The point about all of this is the American industrial base has decayed to the point where, like, more and more actual workers are not involved in that. They're engaged in, the service industry, the intangible economy, so to speak. So what are you going to do as like leftists to tackle the fact that the American productive base of the economy that would be needed was the basis for FDR's welfare capitalism, and the basis also for the ultimately failed LBJ Great Society? That doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. So what do you do? What do you do to respond to that? How are you building towards power? Well, the answer is that the American left and the British left cop out of that. They don't want to look at that question. They pretend that we're via some sort of noodling reforms that the system can be made a little bit fairer. But the fundamental question, the fundamental problem is, because everything's based on just basically the movement of capital, both real and fictitious, around, and everything is leveraged on gigantic amounts of debt. So what happens when the crash comes and everything falls down with it? Like what is the left doing to organize around that point? What program do you have to set out there before the working class when the big one hits, so to speak? And the answer is nothing. The answer is nothing. I mean, Corbyn didn't have anything. Sanders really didn't have anything. There was some talk about reindustrialization, but it was very vague. The Greens certainly don't have anything. In fact, they think deindustrialization is positively good. And Chris Crotone's new project basically just wants to preserve the NGO state, because this challenge that's in front of us, it is quite intimidating because it's huge, which is how do you deal with a decaying imperialist country if the current route that we're on continues, which is slowly the imperialist powers get pushed out of more and more markets overseas. Slowly, various, shall we say, nationalistic or sovereignist states emerge, which insist on, well, some old Adam Smithian principles, which is basic control of key resources and state monopolies over key resources, and the rejection of unfair terms of trade. Well, that's the entire Western model down the fucking toilet. So what's going to happen then? Nobody wants to answer that question. They always want to keep on pretending.
Yeah, and I also think just to wrap up this part and move on, so we have time to talk about the three-way between Polanski, Sultana, and Corbyn, May, September, August. Anyway, it's kind of interesting just because for people who don't know, Catrone, of course, is very steeped in the Frankfurt School and all of that. And for anybody who's tried to read some of that stuff, it can be quite, I don't know, intimidating. But it seems like, what was the point of all of that, politically and economically, for him just to sound like a bog standard progressive liberal? He comes out of all of that and looks at the situation. It's like, you know what we need? Cosmopolitanism, third wayism. It's like, what? You know, I just think, and I'm not saying that Frankfurt School, now that's worthless, but in terms of political economy, I think the proof is in the pudding. So that's one thing, and it seems like that in order to be pre-political is just a nice way of saying dwelling in idealism and moralism and even theology to a certain point, or kind of an atheistic theology. And yeah, it's just this odd thing because again, with him saying he's the last Marxist, and I have read Lenin's Imperialism, and it's like, what? It's just weird. It's just weird to me. So yeah, it's just odd. You have to go. Why go through all that pain and drama of figuring out the Frankfurt School and maybe all the other critical theory and the French theory and all that, just to end up sounding like some Whig or something? From if that's the right terminology. My British political party history is not as good as it should be. I just thought that was kind of weird. It's like, really, that's where you end up. Okay.
Well, again, I had
and if I could just for that part, and then what I want to make sure I want you to touch upon again before we move on to the UK left survivor game, is that again for him being, and I know he can be dialectic. I know I'm not saying he is. What's really irritates me with him is that he could be using his mental capacity for so much more than what he does. But when he talks about this kind of dismissal, again, to be convenient, oh, I don't have to weigh in on any of this stuff overseas because, there's all petty bourgeois. But then also he will say, well, you're building socialism out of capitalism, not opposed to it, as if nationalism and petty bourgeois formations aren't part and parcel of the capitalism that the socialism is building out of, with all the twists and turns that implies. So I find that odd. And also, it's very undialectic because it's very much taking these formations and the people's positions as fixed in these areas. So, I mean, I just get so grossed out because isn't it convenient? Isn't this a convenient way for him to absolve himself from some of the really nasty shit and just outright lies that he's said, in particular about the Israeli-Palestinian situation and the Iranian situation? But you can look back on our previous bad trot takes that have focused on that. So if you could just kind of put an angle on that, like, is this where is this just more of a reason that if you're focused on political economy or working class politics, there's really no reason to go through any of the Frankfurt School and the critical theory and all that stuff, because all it's going to end, you're going to end up just sounding like I don't know, pretentious liberal. And the weird his take on anti-imperialism not being Marxist.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is, like, first let's tackle the last point first, which is that the anti-imperialist content in Marxism, which was always there. Lenin and Stalin didn't introduce it. Like Marx was an enthusiast for the revolt of the Indians against the British in 1857, and again, like the clearly outlined in some of his works, like the evils of imperialism and colonialism, which was an evolving piece of work. Now, initially in the 1840s, along with many others, because Marx and Engels were from that sort of immediately post-Napoleonic generation. Where they saw like the march of progress and the march of industry as bringing a march of industry and industrialization as breaking down the old barriers and preparing the ground for socialism. Initially, there was a period where they were, if not in favor of colonialism, then they saw it as bringing potential benefits in terms of forming a proletariat that could then, march on towards socialism. Now, towards the end of their lives, they began to redevelop that point of view, because it became obvious that in actual fact the imperialists weren't interested in developing those kinds of things. But I mean, to take the radical critiques that they started to develop and to turn it into actual Marxist praxis took Lenin, it took Stalin. So what Coutron does is he takes the earlier parts of like Marx and Engels, where they were, if not in favor of colonialism, then they had a view of it that it brought a certain progress. And he takes that and basically says that's the legacy. And as you say, it's very convenient because it gets you out of having to make any comment whatsoever on difficult issues. Now, the point about this is people like to draw this distinction between, oh, well, we can't be concerned with Gaza, we can't be concerned with Iran, we can't really comment about that because, all the people involved in running those places are all nasty and petty bourgeois or fundamentalists or whatever. So I won't say anything about it. We're going to concentrate purely on domestic issues. That doesn't work. It doesn't work because, well, what is the political economy in what is the political economy of the United States? What is the political economy and in terms of like the British economy? What is the analysis that political economy will grant you of the way that those states are set up? Where does the money come from, to put it crudely? And unless you're answering that question, then you're not actually doing a Marxist analysis of the system. What you're doing is what I would argue Chris Coutron does is there's the theory, which is up here, high in the air, with the ghost of Adorno. And then there's the politics, which are down here somewhere with the ghost of FDR, essentially, and the New Deal coalition. And the two don't meet. Not really. Not really, I would argue. It's purely, the theory remains purely academic. Now, I would argue there is some practical usage one could gain from reading the Frankfurt School. If you bring your
thank God, because I really worked hard on understanding that stuff.
Well,
as some of our regular viewers may know, or people who read my Substack, I am an accidental Zizekian. Yes. And I go back and forth to be like, is this just a bad romance? Do I just have to do something with this because, God damn it, I put time and energy into figuring this out, or whatever? But sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's value to be gained from Zizek's works. It's just that Zizek's reactionary political pronouncements should be, laughed at and disregarded. But the point being that there's ways to use all of this theory and actually doing stuff. But for Chris Coutron, it's like the theory must remain pristine. It must remain in this glass bubble that is never infringed upon by the horrors of the outside world. Now, that's why his politics are so fundamentally weak, because there is no political economy to it whatsoever. Because if you did that analysis, you would have to dive into the sort of horror show of the actually existing American economy and the way it relates to the actually existing American working class. He doesn't want to do that because that would reveal a fundamental truth, which is that you can't say I'm not concerned with stuff that is happening outside the United States, because so much of the profits of American capitalism are derived from stuff that goes on outside of the United States. So, well, and also the reason why so much capital is sent out of the United States for investment in other places is because the profit margins on that can be generated by employing American workers are so low. And it's why, of course, that they have been seeking to reduce the wages of American workers. For
well, also just to, I know that you know this, but I want to mention it for people who might not. And of course, if I'm getting this wrong, please correct me. That it's like if you block out imperialism or anti-imperialism, then you're blocking out foreign policy, because a lot of foreign policy is about protecting those investments overseas. And that's why you want puppet regimes, and that's why you have all the various ways of bribe and containment. Is because if you have a lot of capital going overseas, you don't want anybody over there getting any weird ideas to throw a wrench in you being able to to repatriate or to accumulate your profits in that way. So it's just like oh, well, isn't, again, the convenience of it all is really shameless.
Yes.
I think
It's a con. It's a con because, I mean, he must know it's a con. Unless I don't think he's a stupid man, but he must know that where again, you don't need to dip too far into academic research to find out where the profits are generated from in American capitalism. You can just look at the American government's own website to see how much capital gets imported and exported every year. Like how many investments the American capitalist class has overseas. This is the purpose of NATO. I mean, we have talked about this before, but like, I'll mention it again. This is the purpose of NATO was to do two things principally. Firstly, in 1949, it was to prevent revolutions in Western Europe. That was what its initial purpose was for, to retain American access to these markets and associated markets all the way through the Cold War, and to extend the reach of American capital after the Cold War, and for it to be guarded with, the forces of the armed forces of the American state. That's the purpose of NATO. That's the purpose of all of the imperialists' military alliances. It's gaining access to markets and protecting your access to markets and resources. And so if you're not going to tackle that at all, and even just to flip it back to domestic, if you're not going to tackle the $1 trillion plus American military budget, well, then what are you doing? Because that's the giant black hole into which like a huge amount of state resources fall. So what, you're not going to question that? Because in the same way that Sanders doesn't really question that, because the American weapons companies have been very careful to place just the right amount of jobs in just the right amount of states. So what are you going to question then? Essentially, if this project is going to be about just domestic politics and you're not having any of that nasty foreign policy stuff, you're going to ignore that because it might be too awkward. Okay, well then what are you questioning? Because you can't question the military budget, because that's necessary to defend civilization as the shield of the West overseas. So,
and I would also say, wouldn't you say this ties into immigration? Because if the U.S. Runs out of proxies and mercenaries to fight their wars, how are they going to replenish their military coffers, up in terms of cash, but in terms of people? My guess would be immigrants.
I mean, this is the deal. I mean, this is the deal that they've been working on for some time. I mean, I remember reading about green card soldiers 20 years ago for the American military. Same is true for the British military. Like, an increasing number of their recruits come from Caribbean islands, come from African nations. So the domestic population won't fight the foreign wars. So who do you get? Well, you get the people who've just showed up. You find a few 100,000 of them. Give them and their families a path to citizenship and put them in the army. Oh, then you also lower the physical and the intellectual standards needed to join as well. That's the other big thing. But again, like, if you're saying that the various issues are untouchable, well, then you can't touch immigration either, not in a real way. Because again, that's a central issue for the American capitalist class. It relates directly to the role that imperialism plays in destabilizing other countries. Just look at where the great bulk of the migrants into the United States come from. Okay, so what, you're not going to touch that either, because that's also a priority for the ruling class. And you don't want to get into that conflict. And you don't want to have an awkward conversation with a worker. Okay, so what are we touching then? So we've basically come back to, if we've ruled all of that out, because it's all connected to too many hot button issues, then what have we got? Barack Obama's platform from 2008? Is that it, basically? A sort of, as I mentioned in the opening, a badly photocopied version of Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition. So,
well, and it's so sad how cheap. I mean, I guess if it's desperation, there's so much competition for decent jobs, and with the not, of course, in terms of money, but also in terms of status. because you have this NGO stuff, which of course is a reason why a lot of PMC and so-called progressives were all pissed off about U.S. aid being looking like when U.S. aid would look like it was going to be cut out completely rather than just kind of repackaged and given over more fully to the State Department. But so you have that, and then when you have, and it's not just on the left, but that so you have that. So but then you have the Trump thing. Whenever you have a thing like immigration, it doesn't it just set up it just tees up another round of patronage politics, doesn't it? And like, okay, like if you say the right things or do, then the Trumpists will kind of deal with you for like the hotel sector or the agricultural sector or whoever, like, or we only really want the bad guys, just the criminals out. And it's just amazing how easy you can be bought off. So you have the NGO sector, you have, which I guess is the progressive side, and then you have the ICE and the more coercive side, maybe that maybe caters to the more right side of the American ego or id. And then you have these policies that just allow for cutouts and exceptions. And while all this is going on, and we're just don't know our ass from a hole in the ground, to use an American a working class expression. Again, the economy, it just keeps on keeping on.
Yeah.
And I didn't see, again, I'm saying something just probably what you're saying in a different, less streamlined way. But again, there's nothing in any of the control drone that gets at any of that.
No.
I think maybe he's just angling for George Soros. What is that? The open society position.
Yes. Well, that's probably what he's after. I mean, again, like
the sun takes over.
You learn if you've been on the left for how long is it for me now? Like I first got involved in leftist politics in 1999, very very briefly. So it's 26 years now. When I was 17. And
that's why he has the hairline he does, people.
That's where it's all gone. Trotskyism took my hair, basically. Now, the thing you learn quite quickly is that, like, and again, this is a very long tradition in Britain, as it is in the United States. Like the people who run the institutional left know where the line is, and they don't cross it. They really don't. Sometimes the line gets pushed forward by mass working class struggle or, a change in the international picture, for instance, Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, etc. But the gatekeepers know where the gate is to be closed. And at the moment, the gate is closed basically in your face as soon as you move a slightest amount forward. No reform can be permitted. And therefore, the gatekeepers know, like Chris Cutrone knows, like I would argue, Jeremy Corbyn knows, and Zach Polanski knows, that there will be no reform because the system can't take it. It's like this tottering sort of tower of like financialization can't take being reformed. And they all know this on some level because I don't think any of these people are dumb. So they put out other things that will attract an audience, that will sound pleasing to the ear, that will pretend to the middle class leftists sitting at home who are just about starting to notice that a grocery shop has doubled in price, and that's rather nasty. But they're starting to get a bit antsy. So we'll offer them something which sounds pleasing, but it's not serious, and it's not meant to be serious, and it's meant to again like keep everything within acceptable lines. That's the point. And
fantastic.
I think
sorry, I just want to say fantastic segue, Alex.
Yes.
And I just made it to small screen so you can see we're now gonna. There's not as much to say, and we need to wrap up here. I know he's a busy Stalinist. Is that for those of you who don't know, in the UK, there's the Labour Party, which has been the kind of flagship left party in the UK for a long time, is on having hard times. No one likes Starmer, but not that it's just Starmer. But anyway, Jeremy Corbyn was pushed out. Him and Zara Sultana, or they I don't know. There's this again, it kind of fits with Guitron because they're also in kind of almost a pre-political, or they don't have a party yet. They're just having a good time or fighting about potentially starting a party and what the content of that party would be. But anyway, I wanted to get your take because we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I'll please look at that when we talked about the Your Party, or the Your Party's already over, and it being a morbid symptom of a dying left that's in denial and is thwarting the new from really taking root in any real way. But I want to get your take on what I've seen is that after that, the Green Party had its conference, and all of a sudden, Zach Polanski was all over social media. And I was like, I'd never heard, I mean, I don't really follow Greens that much because I've learned they're just kind of liberals who like, solar panels and windmills and think that you can just stop oil and whatever. But all of a sudden, Zach Polanski's on the scene, and people are like, "Oh my God, he's a breath of fresh air! Oh, look at him, he's telling it like it is, and he's this and that and the other." And I also saw that him and Zara Sultana had a couple of events together, which is why I made this meme, or I used this typical meme. So you have Jeremy Corbyn looking at Zara Sultana, who's now looking at Zach Polanski. And anyway, just what do you make of all this? And had you heard of Zach Polanski before? And what's going on here? Is this just to make it seem like there's choice where there isn't choice, or
yes,
or what?
rather short, answering in a rather short fashion. But the promotion of the Green Party should be suspicious to anybody, because when suddenly someone is presented as the next big thing, is because some element of the ruling class and the state machine have decided to promote them. Like Zach Polanski's now all over the BBC, Sky. You got Greens being mentioned a lot on GB News. He's being centered as like the left alternative. The question has to be asked why, and to get to the truth of that, you have to examine the record of Green parties when they've been in government. And that's something that the English Greens were, or in local council, which the Greens have been in England. So in Scotland, where I sit now, they were in a coalition government with the SNP, and their major achievement was presiding over the further destruction of social housing and making sure that men could get into women's prisons.
But wait a minute, I thought they want to abolish landlords. They mean abolish housing, or?
I think they meant to make more people homeless. But this is the thing. They say things like, we're going to abolish landlords. They say things like, oh, we're going to abolish the monarchy. Like, they know they're not going to do either of those things. Because again, it's something which gets the left petty bourgeoisie very excited. Because somebody's out there saying forbidden things on BBC, and the BBC presenter gets hot under the collar and shouts at Zach Polanski, and Zach Polanski looks, reasonable and strong, etc. Then boldly says that men can become women on the NHS or something like that, and that pleases them even further. But again, look at the reality of Greens everywhere, which is that and I know they claim they're all separate parties, but they all act in similar fashion. German Greens, the party of NATO, the party of Annalena Baerbock, the party that supported the war on Yugoslavia in 1999 under Joschka Fischer, the great radical of 1968, and the rabidly support the war on Russia up to this day. The Irish Greens were part of a government that supported like financialization and a massive property bubble that led to the cratering of the Irish economy in 2008 to 2010. The Scottish Greens we've already covered. The English Greens and Welsh Greens, led by Zach Polanski, what do they do when they get into a position of responsibility, such as controlling Brighton Council? Very appropriate place for them to be, one might argue. But what did they do there? Well, when it came down to it, roughly the same thing the Labour Party had been doing before them. Roughly the same thing, which is they ended up in an industrial dispute, funnily enough, with the refuse collectors there. The same industrial dispute that the Labour Party council had been involved in beforehand. And again, like the same policies recur in English local government, regardless of who's there. So the Greens represent anything. Can we extrapolate from them experience of them being running Brighton Council. I believe they were the single largest party. They are the single largest party in Bristol Council. Well, no, because they're not interested in actually challenging the basis of power. So you could argue that it's rather difficult to enact change at council level, given the restricted budgets, etc. But they haven't even really challenged the restricted budgets. What they've done is accept the, if you'll pardon the rather Northwest English expression, bag of shite that's handed to them by the council officialdom, and then they'll say, okay, well, we'll now serve that up to you, but we'll put a Just Stop Oil sticker on it or something like that. We'll declare Bristol to be, I don't know, a carbon neutral city by 2030 or something, because these like fiddling little distractions and like these pieces of like deliberately provocative statements of identity politics, or in the case of the Scottish Greens, very dangerous expressions of identity politics. This is what they can actually deliver on. So all the other stuff about, we're going to devolve the economy down to a local level. As Caroline Lucas would write about that in her book. We're going to have like more cooperatives. We're going to have more carbon neutral city centres. We're going to have 15-minute cities or whatever. It all just turns to nothing when they're confronted with the reality of the institutional power of the state bureaucracy, and behind them the wider power of the British ruling class. Because again, if you've not got an appreciation of what the political economy is, then you've not got anything, because you're not serious. You're just out to fiddle around the edges, which is, and this is Zach Polanski's whole thing. What is he angling for ultimately? Well, it's roughly the same thing, I would argue, that Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana are angling for, which is why they're sort of,
and Chris Cutrone, really.
Sorry?
And Chris Cutrone, really.
Yeah. Which is, we want to be the established left opposition. We want our nice little sphere. And ultimately, for Zach Polanski, it's coalition that he wants. The same for the Scottish, what the Scottish Greens got, he wants, which is that if we cast ourselves forward 3 or 4 years into the time of like the next general election in old perfidious Albion, well, what will happen is Farage will be the front runner, and the entire left, and I mean the entire left, will do the same thing that the French left did, which is call for voting tactically to stop fascism. So that will be the big call. So vote for Greens here, vote for the Labour Party here, vote for your party here, if they're still around at that stage, vote for the Liberals here, to pull together a grand coalition to stop the evil fascist. That's what will happen. And it's what Zach Polanski is specifically angling for. They don't want power by themselves, God no. That they do want to be in a coalition.
But yeah, they don't want to be responsible.
Yes.
You gotta have someone to blame.
This is what they're all angling for, is that the grand coalition. And this was talked about in the heady days of Corbynism as well, 6 or 7 years ago. There was people I ran into in the Labour Party at the time who were talking about, oh, we're going to have a grand progressive alliance to shut out back then it was the Tories forever. So it's going to be Labour, Greens, Liberals, SNP, all together in some horrific hybrid to shut out the reactionaries. And of course, all it will really do is create an unstable mess that will perhaps get in and govern for a few years. Then an even stronger vote for reform will follow afterwards. This is the path that Polanski is on, and it's a path that has been trod before by his equivalents in Scotland, Ireland, and Germany, and it will lead to exactly the same thing, which is an awful lot of disappointed middle-class voters wondering why there's still a landlord and why there's still a monarchy, because Zach promised and he didn't deliver on it.
On day one.
Yes.
I always thought that was so funny when I heard that first thing. I thought, okay, they like to get the cart before the horse. Like their slogan, I guess that maybe makes sense in a way. You sloganeer what you want to end up with, or maybe think you do. But I was like, okay, there's still a monarchy. So even by some trick accident of fate, you get a green government in the UK. I'm all like, it's still the Majesty's government, isn't it? And yes. The Majesty is pretty much like the landlord. Landlord's landlord.
Yeah,
it's all so silly. It's all so silly. All right. Well, Alexander. Oh, I should. Oh no, I can't. There's no way for me to. There you go. Red. That's a laser eye, Alexander. People love this AI of you, I have to say, and I'm glad that you're fine with me using it because it makes me happy. Um, so yeah, that I'll let you go. I just want to say that it seems that again, maybe the positive side of this, the glass half full of this Catrone stuff and this left survivor UK designated opposition. Where will Zoltana go? Where will she end up at the end? Is it with Zach or Corbyn, or what kind of coalition is going to happen, and who will? There can be only one. But with Catrone stuff, it's that again, it's just more clear. I don't know why we still need to be clear that this post-war left is dead. Let it die. Just let it go.
Yeah.
Because what does he have? What's on offer here? Oh, politics or pre-politics. Okay. Not revolutionary in this, but this kind of not PMC, but PMS. So professional, expert, managerial socialism, which is the same thing really as the PMC. Class struggle, whatever. Let's focus on civic virtue, I guess, and learning how to, get along better. And then, of course, not anti-imperialism, but just kind of neocon and Marxist drag, I would suppose. But I have learned since that a lot of neocons were originally Trotskyists, so I guess that fits. But anything, I'll leave the last word up to you. Anything you want to, almost your last word up to you. Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say to put a cherry on top of this shit Sunday that is the post-war left?
I would say that all the attempts to recreate the post-war Anglo-American European left have all failed, and again, they've all failed for exactly the same reasons, which is that I would say that the likes of Catrone and others are now almost, in fact, there's no almost about it. These people have become anti-materialist in their politics because they don't study the material basis for the countries that they purport to want to build a left in. There's no study of the material conditions whatsoever, which is unforgivable for people who refer to themselves as Marxists. Like, you have to start with a study of like the objective factors, which is what actually exists, not what you wish exists or what you imagine exists, but the economy as it is, the state as it is, the ruling class as they are, the strength of the different class forces as they are. And we should be interrogating that as our starting point. But instead of which, you get this starting point of, well, we're going to go in with the NGOs and the churches and every other form of sort of bankrupt liberal political expressions of the past, and we're going to get together to try and form a left opposition. Well, the American reactionaries will just drive an ice tank over you, metaphorically speaking, if that's the case, because it will have no appeal to the American working class. Just to conclude on this point about voting and like the working class politics in the United States, which I do pay a good deal of attention to, like far more people didn't vote in the last presidential election than voted for either candidate. That's not just because these people were incapable of getting to a polling station. It's that the huge numbers of American workers quite correctly have identified that there's no significant difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. So that the starting point should be, well, you've already got a huge number of American workers who've made the correct conclusion that the bourgeois politics is a sham and a lie and a joke. But rather than go towards them and look to how to develop amongst these workers, what Chris Catrone wants to do is to gather the ever-diminishing forces of the American labor aristocracy and petty bourgeois left and desperately form square to defend their turf against the evils of the right wing, the reactionaries, etc., etc.
Or the ACP, Jackson Hinkle and Hazelden.
Yes, defend themselves from Haz's horde, so to speak.
Yeah. The millennial, those bad millennials.
They're the bad millennials who at least are trying to wrestle with the problem of like, well, how to actually organize the American working class as it is, rather than as you would like it to be. And so again, like this is the last resort of the American and British labor aristocracy and leftist petty bourgeoisie is to retreat into fantasies and like sit down and play their role in the show that is going on. In America, it's a show put on by with Donald Trump as its ringmaster. And Mr. Catrone and co. will join in as the loyal leftist opposition, bleating temporary opposition to various different things whilst saying nothing of any substance whatsoever. It is empty. This dream is over. It's time to let it go.
On that note, thank you so much, Alexander. Everybody, please do like, subscribe, share, etc. I know that I'm on so many things now. I'm on Kick and Twitch, although I haven't quite figured it out because it says that I streamed on there, but I can't find my streams afterwards. But you know, it's a journey, not a destination. So maybe I'm on there. I don't know. But please do like, share, subscribe. This is season 2 of Morbid Symptoms, and I've negotiated with my husband that I can dedicate myself to this another year to see if I can make something out of it that's self-sustainable. So if you believe in this project and me and my guests, etc., please do like, subscribe, share, and if you can actually, throw some money my way, that is good. It all goes towards this project. Please do like, share, subscribe my channel, Alexander's channel. What's the next Decline and Fall? Coming
out later today. It's our regular episode where we discuss like current events. So the latest from Russia, the latest decline and fall of the European Union, the failed chip war on China, and all of this will be out later today, probably about 8 p.m. Perfidious Albion time.
Okay, and I will go back at some point in this afternoon and add that information to the people who have come here via my routes rather than yours. But great programming. Yeah, well, Comrade Alexander, you do have to come back and try to convince me to be a Stalinist. Remember, we had to do that on the bad trot take, or maybe we'll call it something else. That I'm not anti-Stalinist. I'm Stalinist curious, and we'll see if by the end of the program you can explain to me, or you can convince me why that shouldn't be one of the things that I try not to get involved in at all. Like a Catrone, like, oh, let's just not bring up the S, bring up the S word. And part of that is because I just don't know enough of the history to weigh in on it. And probably also a part of that, and I'm aware of this, is that growing up in the United States, of course, there's certain people or names that even though they've been friended in a certain way, it's just hard for me to, add that to the list of ists and isms that I can be associated with. But I hope that we can do that at some point, that we can have a show, and at the end of it I'll be like, okay, if someone said, what are you, a Stalinist, am I now prepared to be like, yeah, why not? Okay.
Take the Stalin pill. It will make life better.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Alexander, and my best to everybody over there in Scotland.
All right, same to you.
Thank you. Bye. All right. So, I hate it when my picture goes big. It makes me feel, I don't want it to be small though. Let's see. How can we do here? This one. Oh, that's good. Hi. Okay, everyone. That was Alexander McKay, Bad Trot Takes. It's a busy week. I'm streaming again tomorrow. 10:30 a.m. UK time, 5:30 p.m. Beijing, with a new guest. Oh gosh, I want to say, and anyway, I know his last name's Jenkins, Ryan Jenkins, and he's going to talk about the ghost in the woke machine and the work that he's done on, and how the CIA and other CIA-like organizations are behind a lot of the culture war stuff. So that'll be a fun. Yeah, that's tomorrow. And then Sunday, I'm having Zhang Yu on again, and he's a political commentator and anti-imperialist rapper based in Taiwan. And he's going to be on, and we're going to talk about China and the U.S. and the West's identity crisis. them trying to figure out, trying to accept the new game board, so to speak, and that'll be noon UK time, 7 p.m. Beijing/Taiwan time. Please do check that out. I'm sorry, I have to go. I have a kid thing to sort out at the school, and so I cannot. Normally, I would want to come back and go through the comments and questions and put those up on the screen. I'm really sorry that I can't do that. I will try to look over those, and if there's anything pressing, in particular questions or clarifications, I'll bring that up next time or forward them to Alex if they're directed towards him. So again, thank you all. Please do, again, I hate saying this, but I need to say it, like, share, subscribe, etc. And if you, in addition to that, if you have an idea for a book to review or a guest to have on or a take to take, please do let us know, or me know, with a royal S. All right, I'm going to drop myself down here, and I'm going to put on the outro that you can see the various channels if you to follow along with Morbid Symptoms and the like. So I hope to see you guys tomorrow and Sunday as well, for those of you where the time allows for it. Thank you. Okay, see you next time.